What kind of childhood did Chris have? What kind of upbringing did he have?
Chris had a good upbringing. He was very loving, very empathetic, very caring.
You'd mentioned he was in the Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts.
He was in Boy Scouts, from a Cub Scout all the way to Eagle Scout, and he became an Eagle Scout when he was 14 years of age.
Anything else
he loved baseball, he loved football, he loved all sports, and he was very good at all of them.
So just kind of a typical all-American...
outgoing, person.
At some point he would have got mixed up in drugs. How hard did he try to get off of them, and how hard was it for him? How hard was it for you to go through that?
He tried to get off drugs many times. He started on drugs at a very young age, and he tried getting off drugs many times. He went through rehab. He tried going through just not doing drugs. He'd go and get Subutex from a psychologist in order to stay off heroin, and he said it was the hardest thing that he could ever do because it controlled him.
Was he a confidential informant for the Manatee County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, he was.
And do you remember when he told you and what he told you about the process?
He told me that he was a confidential informant and that he was working with Greg Dunlap, and he called Archer. He took it off of a cartoon.
And Greg Dunlap is the detective.
And Greg Dunlap is the detective that showed up here many times to collect him.
Now, this is a dangerous job. How concerned were you about the danger he was put in, and how concerned was he about the danger?
Well, he was too concerned at first. He thought of it more of a game because he wanted to prove to the detectives and stuff that he can get these bad people off the streets. The people that were really bad drug addicts that were trying to hurt people and stuff, but
I mean, essentially, these are citizens doing police work. I mean, these are untrained citizens doing police work.
Right, and when somebody's doing drugs as much as he was, because every time he went into a house, he had to do drugs. And therefore, then they busted him, busted the other people or whatever. But Chris still had to do drugs, which then each time it got more and more drugs. And therefore, he was losing it.
Right, so they're not looking out for his best
and
interest.
They weren't looking for his best interest at all, because they were pushing him to do more and more homes to get more people busted.
Right. The person who killed him, do you think he was introduced?
He was introduced by Archer, because Chris wouldn't have known him any other way, and he thought Fresh was his friend. Fresh was the guy that killed him, which was Manrique Miller. And he thought he was his friend. I thought he was his friend. But he wasn't evidently his friend. All he was looking for was $20.
Should people be used as confidential informants? I mean, is this...
No,
like I said,
not the way that... Not if they're a druggie already or had been in drugs or... No.
And Detective Dunlap, you said, had come to the house several times to pick him up.
Many times.
Was that a concern? I mean, were you worried that someone from the public or a drug dealer could see them together? Or it's kind of... Is that irresponsible?
Evidently, because even neighbors was taking pictures and of vehicles of him pulling up, and you know, you just don't do that. You don't expose a person like that, especially if they're doing confidential informant work.
Did they overuse him? Did they use him too much?
Way too much.
Were you concerned about that too?
Way, exactly. Yeah. The more and more they used him, the more money he thought that he was going to get, so he was okay with it, because all he wanted to do was pay off some fines that he had so he can move to Tennessee to be with his daughter.
Do you think the Manatee County Sheriff's Office is in some part responsible for his death?
Absolutely.
And in what way?
Because they are the ones who allowed this to continue on, especially knowing that each time he went into a druggie's house, Chris had to do more drugs. And they didn't care about Chris. All they were worried about was getting their bust.
Right. Is there any good that can come from this?
I hope that they reevaluate the way things are going down. Train the detectives and stuff a little bit more, and especially if they're going to use the public to capture people, they should train them and be a little bit more careful on who they choose.
Have you ever heard from anyone from the sheriff's office since your son died?
Why would I? No, they wouldn't contact me. They don't care less about Chris right now because they got what they wanted.
What did they want?
They wanted drug bust and to take people down regardless of what consequences was going to happen. All they wanted to do was get a number.
Don't they owe you an explanation or a voice of sympathy?
No sympathy, not even a card, not a phone call. Archer to this day has not even called. And considering we've had many conversations on the phone as mother and detective, at least he could have done is apologize.